Hello everyone, I'm Samantha Jane Smith.
And I'm Jacob Keynes, and you are listening to the Classical Queer Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Classical Queer Podcast. This month, we are very thrilled to be joined by India Gailey, who is a cellist and a performer and a composer, and as I know them, a myriad of other things. And so also someone who happens to be based in my home city. I mean, largely you travel quite a bit, but I think you're a lot of the time based in Halifax as well, and lucky enough to have performed with you in several things over the years. Welcome to India Gailey, cellist.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Hi.
Thanks for being here. And as we tend to start with the podcast, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your practice, as pretentious as that word tends to be, but like your practice, your kind of work, who you are, where you come from, what you're up to, all that kind of stuff.
I am mainly a cellist, but increasingly a composer, and I feel like many kinds of music are part of my life. I play a lot of contemporary classical, but I also sometimes play with bands and singer-songwriters, and I have played a lot in the experimental improvisational realm, and I have a very mixed background. I guess that's what brought me to this place. Just growing up playing fiddle music and playing in rock bands and studying Javanese gamelan and playing with tabla players. And I'm just very interested in lots of different kinds of music and where they intersect. And I dabble in other art forms too. I love contemporary dance. I wouldn't consider myself a dancer, but I aspire. And I've been writing a lot of poetry recently as well, but I've not published anything. I'm not ready for that yet.
And I suppose that makes perfect sense to me, that my understanding of you as an artist is so multifaceted and so kind of maybe superseding of genre or style or kind of area. And so it makes sense to me that you would say yourself that you draw on so many different areas and practices and types of expression of art. And so I look forward to the day where you publish your poetry. I'm sure it's equally as exciting as your music making, and I hope you dance more. I think I've known you to do
the
some
classical
collaborative
dance
stuff.
Podcast will be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'll be the next iteration. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just like so interested in all art because it sort of comes from the same root of just like being present and open with space, and that can give rise to like any art form, which I guess has given me the freedom to explore all these different disciplines or explore with other disciplines. And yeah.
What was kind of your, you said you were a fiddle player when you kind of started or when you were younger. So what were sort of your influences at that time? Where did you get this love of, all things musical by the sounds of things? Where did this come from? Is this a family thing, or did you just what you heard?
Well, I had a friend when I was maybe 4 or 5 who had started playing violin, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I started asking my parents for one right away, and it was my 7th birthday. They got me a little quarter-sized fiddle, and I was so into Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, especially Spring, and I really wanted to play that. And so when I first got my fiddle, I was like sort of making my own version of that because I didn't really know how to play notes. I was just kind of scrubbing my own improvisatory version of Vivaldi's Spring. And one of my first teachers was my friend's mom, and she was a quite serious scholar of Cape Breton fiddle music, and she taught this at universities and stuff. And so I was very fortunate to be able to study with her and just hang out with her family. They were a very musical family. And Kate's husband, David, was also a fiddler and violinist and toured all around the world, mostly performing Baroque music at that time. And hanging out with their kids, we were just always doing something creative. And Owen was my age, and he took up the cello when we were 10. And I just happened to have access to a cello because my mother had begun learning to play when she was pregnant with me. And she had a very basic instrument, student level instrument that had been sitting in the house. And she hadn't kept it up very long because it hurt her hands a lot. But after Owen began learning the cello, I got really inspired, and Owen came over and he taught me everything that he had learned. And there we were, like two tiny 10-year-olds playing on full-size cellos, which were, it was taller than I was by like a foot maybe. And like a full-size instrument is actually too big for me now. Like I play on a slightly smaller cello, so I don't really know how I got around, but that was the beginning of my cello journey.
Well, you've made it work for yourself. Found a way. For those people who are listening who are not Nova Scotian, Cape Breton fiddle music is like a very particular, to my knowledge of fiddle music, I'm not like an expert by any stretch, but it is a very kind of niche subsect of fiddling, even still. And I'm curious if do you still draw on it? Do you still listen to it? I mean, I say that because I still listen to a lot of Nova Scotian music.
Yeah, very occasionally I'll listen to it and I'll break out these tunes that I learned when I was a kid. Like I got to go to the Gaelic College and study with some of these great Cape Breton fiddlers like Jerry Holland, and those tunes are very deep in my bones. Like I can just pull them out, and I think it really impacted my sense of rhythm, just learning this music that's very pulse-based. And I did get to do some work with a fiddle player a few years ago where I was doing like choppy beats. And I think just having that background helped me learn the tunes a lot faster. And yeah, it's so uplifting, I find, that music.
It is joyful music.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, to kind of like extrapolate it, it's also very music by rote. Like it is a lot of memorized. It's a lot of music that you you learn the tune and you can kind of play with it a bit. And like as such an experimental music person and as such an improviser, I wonder if that has kind of embedded itself somewhere in your improvising world.
Oh yeah, I think probably. I never really thought about it, but yeah, just learning things by ear and really tuning in. Oh, that was not a pun intended. Yeah, just having my ear activated in that way, I'm sure. And I used to play quite a bit with this harpist named Ellen Gibling, and she plays a lot of Celtic music, and just interesting. Like her traditional music background is slightly different than my traditional music background, and she knows way more than I know about her specialization. But doing free improvised music and also knowing that she's got these little licks that might be kind of related to that realm. It's just very interesting.
Now, I think one of the things that people who aren't good musicians always think about is improvisation and how people improvise. And we've had lots of different people on here who've improvised, who do this in different ways. How do you go about improvising? I mean, is there a sort of I suppose this may be the wrong way, a methodology of how you improvise? That doesn't sound right. But do you sort of think about it in a particular way, or is it really just free flow? I mean, do you base it on things you've done before? I mean, for people who are not very musical, how does this work?
I feel like it really depends on who I'm playing with, or if I'm playing by myself versus playing with other people. If I'm playing with other people, like there's certain people who I have a very long-standing collaborative relationship with, and we've sort of like formed this common language and this territory that we're used to exploring together. And honestly, that's my favorite thing. It's like, I know I can just sort of make a sound and that they'll respond and that it'll gel into something that will be cohesive in some way. If I don't know someone, it's kind of exciting because I'm trying to figure out what their language is. And sometimes it's completely different from my own. Like a few years ago, I was playing with a tar player from Iran, and his language is completely different from mine. And that was really exciting, using all these scales I was unfamiliar with, using all these quarter tones. And it was just exciting to find my way into that and find where we met musically. And I guess if I'm thinking about how I do it by myself, I guess I notice how my body feels, and I kind of explore intuitively the sounds that are feeling really good and how that might develop into a more of a story, how I might grow that sound into something more elaborate. And I find with my personal improvising that often will turn into something that I codify into a piece, but not always.
Mm-hmm. Do you find when you start this process, so you're there, you've got your cello, you're sitting there and you think, okay, I'm just going to make some sounds? Or do you actually sort of sit there and think, okay, what sound comes to me? Or, I mean, is it driven by hearing something, or is it your mental process that drives the sound you make? Does that make sense? Is it?
Yeah, I guess it depends whether I'm sitting down intentionally to like work on a composition or if I'm just letting myself play. Because if I'm working on a composition, I'm usually imagining some kind of world and trying to illustrate that somehow. But if it's just free, I guess I'm not too worried if like what the sound is doing is matching the story that I'm trying to tell.
Interesting. Yeah. Because I think this is kind of something for non-musical types that it's very difficult to understand, because it's, if music doesn't come into your head, like for non-musicians, it's kind of difficult to see how it works for a musician. I know it sounds kind of silly. You probably just pops into your head and you go, this is going here. But it is kind of fascinating for somebody to see how this process works, I think.
I would even say, as somebody who is mostly like a written based musician, and I've like very gently dipped my toe into like improvisatory world over the past several years, I'm not even sure that it's a process that I remotely understand either. And it's interesting to hear you talk India, as somebody who lives much more in this world than I do, as like a common language between someone when you know them and you understand how they're going to react and work and respond. Because to me, it's always felt like in the several times that it's more than several at this point, but like when I'm improvising, it's like a cat and a dog meeting. I'm still trying to figure out like what the other person is in general. Like I'm still figuring out that kind of base level, but it's really fascinating to watch a really experienced improviser. And I've watched you do it with several people who you know very, very well, and you know their sounds and life, and it's immediate. It's like it's connection on an entirely different level, and it's really interesting to watch how you can skip 12 steps almost. Like you skip so much conversation, even nonverbal conversation, and get to like a much deeper level much faster. And I think there's like part of that is, I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but I think part of that is your personality. Like I think that's a lot of maybe who you are as well as a non-musician or as a human. Do you find like there's an immediacy with people? Is that something?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty open, and I feel people pretty deeply, just as a person and as a musician. So I don't seem to have a problem connecting, but that's not universal. Of course, there are lots of people I have problem connecting with.
No names at this point. Indeed. No names.
Yeah, but it's interesting what you said. It kind of sparked this thought about how I guess relating deeply on a musical improvisational level is sort of akin to when you're talking to someone, it can be easier to get to know them if they know themselves. So knowing one's own musical language to some degree allows them more immediate intimacy. If both people have really explored their instrument and the sounds they like and their technique in a really deep way, that allows for a lot more chemistry and depth together, and a lot more discovery of like what's new with that combination. Like I feel like I've discovered so much about my own playing that I couldn't discover by myself just by playing with other people.
And I wonder where like that connection, so between two performers, that's one kind of understanding of that thing, maybe two improvisers, two performers, two players. How does that translate to working with composers? Because you do a lot of commissioning and performing of other people's works. You're a composer yourself, but you do a lot of playing of other people's works. And so maybe leading into our first listen of maybe Andrew Noseworthy's piece, when you get to work with a composer, is that a similar relationship? Do you really value that they have a deep understanding of their own voice, their own method of writing, their own sounds that they want to create? Or are you more conduit, more vessel, more interpreter of their thing? How much conversation do you look for?
I feel like it's been so different with every composer I've worked with, and I enjoy a vast spectrum of what that kind of collaboration can be. And with Andrew's piece, there was a lot of back and forth. I do really enjoy the back and forth, and when a composer and I can really understand each other's voice and make something special that way. And yeah, Andrew and I did a lot of experimenting with different types of sounds, especially with the pedals he wanted me to use and like the precise timbres that those could achieve. And he was very intentional in crafting something that could have a kind of improvisatory feel, even in the parts that were more through composed. And it feels really nice. I would just to have these pieces that were made especially to accent my strengths. I like that a lot.
I mean, it's kind of let me just say, it's kind of asks a question about, we've talked to composers, quite a lot of them here. Some of them are very, what I might call, quite open and allow very much an interaction with the musician. But some are very, very precise. Some have a very defined view of what this is going to be. So I kind of wonder, in your case, because you're kind of like the improv side of things, when working with people who want that very precise sound and want you to do what they want, is that more of a difficulty for you?
Oh, I am totally cool with that. I've done that way many times. And what I like about that is it often challenges me to grow in a way that I wouldn't. Like trying to achieve what they're imagining might stretch my musical or technical comfort zone. And so I'm completely down. And as long as they're not asking me to do things that are impossible. I've definitely had moments where I was like, yeah, that's totally possible. And it turns out to just not be realistic at all. Because I was just trying to make it work. But I've learned.
Well, shall we listen to a piece that's possible then?
Sure.
We'll start with Andrew's piece. Perhaps you'd like to just do a bit of introduction to it for us.
Yeah. So Andrew got inspired by this little bit of material from a song called Ghosts of My Life and kind of based the whole thing on this little tidbit. And it's sort of like a sort of phantasmic ambient metal exploration of memory and how that echoes through time. And Andrew's a metalhead at heart, grew up in Labrador and then later became a contemporary classical composer. And this piece is called GOML _V7 final mix _less Fox more verb December 13th mastered final.
A catchy little title. Let's take a listen anyway, and then we'll come back to talk about it.
So this, I mean, having now listened to it, I mean, this makes perfect sense to me, both for yourself and for Andrew. Like, it's this wonderful blend of exactly what I would expect Andrew to write for you, and also how you would interpret it, maybe. What was the process of recording it like? Because and maybe processes in where did you record this and how did you do it? Because there's so much happening.
I recorded it at a studio called Stonehouse Sound, which is down in Mahone Bay, an hour south of Halifax. And John D.S. Adams is an amazing recording engineer. I've worked with him a whole bunch now, and he did this whole record. And we recorded certain layers separately. And it's all made so it can be listened in surround sound too, actually. And there were certain parts that Andrew was actually originally intending that I like do simultaneously, but I just found it worked better if I separated out the different voices. And like that plucky bit in the middle is all improvised, kind of on top of the more legato stuff. And there's an overdrive pedal and a really special reverb pedal. It's called a Dark Star by Old Blood Noise Endeavors that can do some interesting things. And then the sample of the root of the material comes in at the end.
Fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
it's so atmospheric. Yeah.
I was going to say that. I mean, it was kind of like I was just there thinking, it actually made you think of lots of different things. To me, it was very imaginative, and and it's one of those things I think you have to listen to a number of times, I think, to get everything out of it. I think when I first listened to it, I went through it and it gave me some feelings, but then I started to listen to bits again and it changed. So I kind of think it's one of those things that sort of, after a few listens, you will get to hear the whole picture of it. I think it's kind of complex in that way, at least to me anyway. So.
I love that. I love how music gets more interesting as it goes on. If it's all too straightforward on first listen, I kind of get less interested, honestly.
Well, this is one thing I think that, at least from my perspective, is kind of what's interesting about modern classical music or experimental music, is that it is can be very complex like this. I mean, I know we can talk about Bach and the complexities of Bach and this kind of thing, but it seems to me quite a lot different these days, and this complexity and new sounds and new ways of doing things kind of make for an interesting listening experience, whether you like it or not. I think is one of the important things here, I think.
Yeah, I love how I guess with this record, Problematica, I was intending to bring together all these different realms of musical community that I'm a part of. And I just love how, in general, those lines are being blurred. It's an increasing trend that, like, all these different kinds of sounds that were never part of classical are becoming part of so-called classical music.
Yeah.
Why the funky sounds?
Yeah.
And you've mentioned the album, the new record, which is Problematica. The title comes from where? Why's it got that title?
It's a taxonomic term that is used to describe a species that doesn't fit into any category, and I just thought that described this realm of music making really perfectly, because it is blurring all these genre barriers. And I also had this underlying vision about this album, not just being about like artistic identity, but just my identity as a person, sort of being a convergence of many things and not necessarily fitting into binaries of our labels in society.
Yeah,
I guess
what a familiar queer idea. Like a wonderfully, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think I had never heard it as a taxonomy word, so like that's a very interesting way to like frame that as a purposefully owning of the inability to fit into any genre. I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gotten the question of like, where's the problem? But I sort of feel like it's this sort of ironic claiming of the word problem or something. Yeah.
It's interesting how it's a reflection of you, though. As you said, it's kind of a reflection of maybe, I mean, I'm putting my words in your mouth, of being a problem by the way people try and define you or something.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's a problem for some people. But like, yeah, I guess I've gone through periods in my life where I felt very lonely and like I didn't have community, and I feel fortunate that I have very rich community right now. Yeah, just kind of being queer and also growing up in I grew up in a Buddhist community that was very different from the culture of everyone I went to school with. And my parents are American, so I have a lot of this American culture, which is subtly extremely different from Canadian culture. And
thank goodness there's Jacob. Sorry, I've heard to throw into politics somewhere along the line. Yeah, carry on. Sorry.
And just struggling with a lot of chronic illnesses, but not in a way that is very visible, and neurodivergence also in a way that is not immediately visible. So I feel like on the surface I can appear somewhat normal. At least that's what I think. I might be completely wrong about that. People might just spot me as a weirdo right away. But then having a bunch of experiences that feel kind of alienating in another way. And yeah, so I just had this motivation to kind of express that complex intersectionality and speak to a kind of experience that I think so many people in our world have with being a complex combination of various identities and maybe not fitting fully into any community, even though, at least for me, I'm lucky to be part of many communities, just not like fully in one.
And I think that you've kind of collected this group of composers who I'm sure, I mean, I only know personally maybe half of them, 2/3, but I think they would agree with all of those sentiments. The people that I do know, that they would really feel that that's an important part of their work as well. And when you're collecting names for an album, when you're starting this process of collaborating and working together, and who you would like to collaborate with, do you have a running list? Is it just kind of by happenstance? I'm assuming that you have deep relationships with most of these people as a human as well, because you want to play their music so badly. But what does that look like?
Well, for this album, it was, I mean, I do have a list, and some of that list is not even written down. It's just like, oh, I would love to work with that person someday. But for this album, I thought very hard about who I wanted to ask, and it was really a combination of like who I had a personal connection with already, and how their art practice blurred genre in some way, and how they might identify with this theme of in-betweenness. And I wanted a real variety of how that would be represented.
And I think you achieved it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And when you asked when you had this idea for this, okay, so maybe this is the same part of the similar question. Did you actually say, okay, I want this album like this, I want to bring together all these parts. So I'm going to choose composers who have a similar view to this and bring them all together in this view. And did you kind of explain the idea behind the album, or was it a bit more, not haphazard, but was it a bit more the other way around, where you had the pieces and then placed them?
It was very much an intentional vision of I want to bring together a combination of people from the experimental and contemporary classical and indie folk realms, and kind of combine those three communities, because those have been the communities in the past several years that I've had the deepest involvement with. And so I wanted all of those realms represented and blended. And there were more people that I asked that weren't available because they were all booked up or whatever. And so it was kind of a surprise, what the final list was going to be and what the music was going to be. A very interesting kind of risk-taking venture, just to kind of feel committed to making an album out of music that I wasn't actually sure if it would fit together and what it would sound like. And
that's great. I think that's great improvisation, isn't it, really? Going the whole album without knowing what it's going to be like. I think that's really says something special, I think, to be able to do that and pull it off as well. I think it's really, really clever. So,
well, thank you.
Well, let's listen to another one.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah, Jacob, what we're going to listen to?
Let's listen to the piece by Sarah Rossi. So maybe tell us about... it is called I Long, and entirely different feel and mood, and also the piece that starts the album. This is your kind of beginning track, which I'm sure was intentional. But maybe tell us a bit about why it's placed where it is, what the piece is, and maybe a bit about Sarah as well.
Sarah is based in Montreal, and she is magical. She's an incredible jazz-trained vocalist, and brings her jazz background into her songwriting and makes just these complex, rich pieces of just incredible songwriting, and works with a lot of different musicians, and also is into dance and very kind of multidisciplinary. And she and I were born a week apart. And at McGill, people thought we were sisters, which is kind of interesting. And
so you've known her for quite a while then. It's quite a long relationship, yeah. Yeah,
we met in 2017, and I played in her band for a little while. She had a big chamber pop kind of ensemble, and we recorded a record that has not been released yet. And my favorite moment was we just did a bunch of screaming at some point. Just 5 of us screaming in the recording studio. I don't remember why, but this piece, I Long, it really felt like the most co-created piece on the record. She created it felt sort of like a sandbox. She gave me some chords and lyrics and a melody and said, pretty much arrange this how I would like. And so I improvised all these different layers, and I really feel like the lyrical material speaks to something very deep in me, and just longing to be free to actually move through the world in a way that feels true, and to honor my needs, and to honor that in other people. So I just felt like it was that, in combination with the kind of vast musical territory that it explores, was a good opener.
What a way to start an album. Let's listen.
Too slow to mind to rest. Too slow to mind to rest.
So when you are performing this, you're singing, you're playing, and maybe I'm like placing too much of it, but it feels very physical. It feels like you can hear vibration of instrument and voice at the same time. What does it feel like to play it? You sing a fair amount while you play, or you have done in the past? Is that something you think about a lot? Is it part of your understanding?
Well, I find it very difficult, and I'm on and off continuously working on it. I guess on and off continuously are contradictory, but I'll go through periods where I work on it very intensely. And I really love the way it feels like when my voice and my cello are resonating completely in tune. It feels, because like my voice is vibrating my body and my cello is vibrating my body, and when they can vibrate aligned together, feels pretty cool. But it's incredibly difficult too. I have to practice it quite a bit, and either the vocal material or the cello material has to be pretty pared down, or else it gets too complicated for me to do it. I'd love to get more complex someday, but my vocal, I feel like I need to work on my vocals. Like, I aspire to be a better singer.
But I think it's surprisingly, I'm not a cellist, but it's not a guitar. Like, it's not like singing to something that is kind of intentionally designed to be a chordal accompaniment.
Yeah, no frets on that thing. Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, you're really out in no man's land. It's really kind of find it yourself. It's a very fluid set of sounds, but I think that's the strength in it. I think it's the strength in that it isn't tethered in the way that you maybe want it to be as a singer singing along with it. But it sounds very in the body. It sounds very fluid. It sounds really in motion, maybe.
Yeah, watery. I'm making a music video for this, so it's going to involve a lot of water.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's something that never occurred to me, that, playing an instrument like the cello, where you've got a big resonant body and you're holding it, as it were, that you actually feel it that much. It's kind of a stupid thing to say that you wouldn't, but I kind of, not thought about that. How is that? You've mentioned a bit about that experience, but just in terms of how it feels to feel the sound. I know that's kind of, I'm not sure what the question is here, but it must be a fascinating experience to have that actually in your body, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. I think the cello, that's something special about it. Like, I don't get that while I'm playing the piano. Of course, there's with every instrument, there's some degree of vibration in the body, but with the cello, it's touching the sternum, which is basically my heart center, and vibrating through that my entire body. And the biggest vibrations are on the lowest notes. And I find it very grounding, actually. It's like a cellular level massage.
It's one of those experiences that, if you haven't experienced, there really isn't a way to fully tell someone what it feels like to play one of these instruments.
Take a vibrator and put it against your sternum.
Yeah. And it's, and like you said, every instrument has a different they feel every instrument vibrates, and they all vibrate differently. Cello is certainly a very visceral one. I always want people to experience what it's like to be a conductor and stand in front of 50 musicians who are making all the sound they can. Like, there is no way to describe that feeling of sound hitting your body like that. But I guess the difference is like when you're the one making it, when you're the instrumentalist, when I'm playing, when you're playing, it's a really different feeling to have that symbiosis happen between like person creating it and instrument enacting it versus not that I want to like release myself of any agency as a conductor, but like when you're just the passive body standing in front of an orchestra and sound hits you is a really different thing than like creating sound with yourself. And I think that's like the beauty of some of these string instruments. Like the beauty of cello is that connection.
Yeah,
but also, sorry, go on.
I do visualization work sometimes where I'm like visualizing like beams of light like coming out of my chest and like radiating through the sound. I don't know if other people do that, but I don't know if it makes a difference actually either. But it's an interesting experience.
Visualization works. You know, people visualize all kinds of things, I think, to get better at their art or whatever they do. I was just going to ask about this because, you know, I think the difference I was trying to get to is the difference between, you know, listening to sound, which you do through the ear, as it were. You know, you've got sound waves moving, and you can have a very loud sound there. But then, you know, like if you stand in front of, you know, you have a infra bass sound where your actual body is vibrating. It's not ear listening, it's body vibrating. And I guess that's the bit I was kind of interested. You said, you know, stick something vibrating and it's your whole body moving with it, which I think is the fascinating thing, because you're generating, I guess, sounds at the frequencies that vibrate certain parts of your body, I guess. So it's kind of interesting. You know, you're feeling it in a different way. It's a body experience rather than maybe a mental experience.
Absolutely. I think that's why certain people like kinds of music that other people don't like. I feel like because it's like resonating certain organs or bones or cavities in us that feel good in some people, but not in others. I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
But I mean, you know, people do have, you know, I mean, I think it is this sort of feeling of sound, you know, that you can get. I mean, if you've ever worn bone conducting headphones, they're different. They sound different. They feel different.
What are bone conducting headphones?
India, get into it.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. No, they're headphones that you actually put here. I mean, some
like at your temples.
Yeah, well, they come round the side in here. Okay. And what they do is so certain, and also it works for deaf people. Some deaf people, they actually have their head vibrates at the frequency. You put the sounds into their head. So with bone conducting headphones, their sound is head sound. It's in here as opposed to going through the ear. And it's kind of interesting because it feels different. At least to me, it feels different. Maybe not to everyone. But
whoa, I want to check that out.
Try them. Yeah, but I mean, I got a friend who actually can't hear through their ears. So what they have is actually they use bone conduction to sound everything. So
how does it sound different? Like, can you hear, if there's words, can you make out the words?
Yeah, but I just think it's like one of those things you can't. I mean, the best way you can do it is actually take that vibrator and stick it on your head, maybe. and you know, and if you vibrate the frequency of that, you will get the head vibrated, but it's kind of a different feel. It's just kind of interesting. But it just sounds so similar, you know, having your body doing these things, you know, and actually moving as you play as well. You know, I can imagine sitting there going, that feels really nice. Let's keep that note going. Or so it's just sort of like, you know, a visceral thing.
Oh, that makes me curious about.
I need to sit in front of a vibrant cello again.
Yeah, find someone with a cello who will let you play it. Just like, I'm curious about that way of listening, and if I would like things that I wouldn't ordinarily like. Like, did you ever listen to the Justin Bieber Slow Down like 800 times?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Not the Justin Bieber, but other things.
I love that.
Yeah.
I didn't like the full speed Justin Bieber, but I love the really slow motion Justin Bieber.
I mean, one very common technique in a lot of electronic music is just to slow down, use a tape loop and slow things down. This one sitting over here, by the way. You just take a tape loop and you just slow it down, and the sound at low speed is so different. And I did it with your clarinet, didn't I, Jacob? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah, and the warble and of the tape makes it sound. You have to try that. Get a tape and just play your cello and slow it down 4 or 5 times, and through a tape that is a bit wrinkled, and it comes out fantastic. Sorry, we're getting off on another course here, but slow down stuff is absolute. I thoroughly recommend. I think the cello would be brilliant at it because it's got that richness of lots of harmonics and things in it.
Oh, yeah,
it'd sound great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Big fan of the slowed down stuff. There's for those people who want a list of wonderful things. There's a recording of the Ervo Pärt set of choral cantatas that they slowed down to like glacial pace, and it's just sitting on a chord for a minute at a time, just listening to the ring, and then like one person moves, and then you're in that chord for a minute. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely stunning.
But isn't that a bit like? I mean, I'm sorry. Can I hop back to something you said? You grew up in a Buddhist community. You said, yeah. So I mean, in a lot of when those Buddhist singing bowls and things where you hit them and the goes on for ages and ages, just dying down. So the sound of that is kind of similar, I guess, in a way. It just has this, quality of just carrying on with very small deviations in it. It's kind of lovely.
Yeah. At the center near my house, they have a really big one, and I've been the leader for sitting several times, and it always surprises me. I think that it's done. Like, I think it's done vibrating. I don't hear anything. And then I touch it, and it's still vibrating. It's a very beautiful thing, still kind of seeping into us on a subconscious level.
Well, I think also it's moving, even as I think it's moving air around, and it's just, it's infrasound. It's below that thing you can pick up. So it's affecting you, I think, even if it's not, you can't hear it. Human sound is, you can't hear that well. So, anyway, wow. Yeah. This is a different turn. We've never gone through this way before, have we, Jacob?
Honestly,
it's great. It's great. I
feel like that's something I kind of think about a lot, and that I don't know what reality is, but I would love to think that making music, even if no one hears it, has some kind of like positive impact energetically, because of the vibrations that just move through the air.
That's very Buddhist. That's kind of right down the Buddhist streak, isn't it, really? That kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
It's okay. No, it's fine. I used to go to a Buddhist place as well and sit there and, trying to contemplate life, the universe and everything. So it's kind of fascinating how it fits in with art and science and the overlap of these things, I think.
It's a beautiful combo. We should maybe play us out with a little bit of maybe Julia Mermelstein would be like a great piece to kind of end with, just as a kind of very different set of sounds. But maybe just tell us a little bit about the Julia Mermelstein, and then we can leave our listeners with the lovely sounds.
And what else is coming up next? What other beautiful sounds have you got after you tell us about Julia? I think.
Okay. Well, coincidentally, Julia is someone I grew up with in the Buddhist community. That is how we know each other. And we reconnected as adults through this piece mainly. And she was really exploring the transition between different sounds in a very subtle way, which was very fun to explore, and embellishing on the acoustic cello sound with a Max MSP patch that she built herself. And it's called Bending, Breaking Through. And what's coming up next is I'm releasing a cello concerto that I wrote. It's called Butterfly Lightning Shakes the Earth. And I think if anyone's listening to this on like the day this podcast comes out, they might be like the first people to know that this is coming out on October 25th on Redshift Records. I wrote it last November mostly and performed it with Symphony Nova Scotia in January. And it's like, I guess, something that combines different aspects of my practice in a way that I had never really experienced before. So I'm just really excited to share it. Just like a big piece with lots of instruments and lots of sounds. I had a lot of fun playing it, and I'm hoping people will enjoy it.
Sounds fantastic. Well, you'll have to come back and tell us about that when it's released and once we
I would love to.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, we'll play out with Julia's piece. Thank you so much for being here, and it's been a great pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So that's all for this episode. You've been listening to the Classical Queer podcast, and Jake and I look forward to being with you next month. The incidental music is courtesy of Jared Miller, and the show was produced by Samantha Jane.